The United Leukodystrophy Foundation presents Caregivers for Pediatric Patients panel. Our presenters today are Ron Chapleau, Alan Fingeroot, and John Wolf. Our panelists give brief introductions. Sorry about that. We're going to begin today with letting our panelists give introductions to themselves. And feel free to be asking questions in the YouTube chat as we go along, and I will pass them along to our panelists. So we'll start with Ron, we'll go to Alan, and then end with John.
Perfect. Thank you, Keely. I guess I would, like all of you, wear many hats. I am a vice president with the ULF, probably for the last 6 years, and I've been with the ULF since 1999, I believe. I'm also a pharmacist. I'm a father of 3 kids with a wife. My wife Marla was also at one point part of the ULF board and is still an active member. I have 3 kids. My oldest is Alexandra. She's my daughter. She is 23 and she's doing a master's in neuroscience under Dr. Bernard. No doubt motivated by my second born, Aiden. Aiden is 22 now. He has MLC, a fairly rare type of leukodystrophy, one of the milder forms. So he's currently in a wheelchair, has had a feeding tube for the last year and a half. But overall, I would definitely take where he is. Considering where I thought he would be at this point 20 years ago. And then my youngest, Liam, is 19, just went into school 2 years ago for commerce. Live in Canada, Ontario, Canada. Always happy to come south of the border. And as I said, this family, the ULF, has been a big part of my life for 20 years now. He's done so much for me. I was happy to give back by becoming part of the board. Alan?
I'm Alan Fingeroot. I'm from Washington State. And I have a son, or had a son, Andy, who was born with Canavans disease. Canavans was something that was, at the time he was born, was very rare, and not much was known about it. He was completely dependent on external intervention. And let me backtrack, but I'm been with the ULF since 1987, and I'm currently the treasurer of the organization. And Andy was the one that got me involved because we found out about the ULF back in '87, and at that time he was finally diagnosed. He was born in '83, and there was no diagnosis. As Andy grew up, he became more and more difficult to handle because of his size and his weight. And we tried to do everything on our own, and changing diapers, feeding, and it was very taxing on us. And we were finally able to get some respite, which gave us a lot of extra time and a little bit of freedom to get away from the house. As we'll talk about it throughout the hour. John?
Thanks, Alan and Ron. My name is John Wolf. I have been with ULF for about the same amount of time as Ron. I think we actually joined the same visit.
Yes.
So I am the father of 2 children, Ashley, 26, Jacob, 23. Ashley is an affected individual with CTX, or cerebrotendinous xanthomatosis. We first got her diagnosis when she was 10 years old and started treatment immediately for her. And I'm a bit of an odd man out in that we won the leukodystrophy lottery, if you will, that she has a very effective treatment for CTX. And with that, she's been able to, with some learning disability and maybe some what some might call compromised decision-making abilities at times, but maybe that's just due to age and maturity level in some ways. She's able to live a mostly normal life. She's, I'm happy to say, a recent mother of about 18 months ago, my first grandchild, and she's living what most people define as normal life, with some difficulties here and there with trying to get her to take her medication like she should be doing. And it's often difficult to manage remotely because she doesn't live in the same state that I do, which is Oregon. I'm in the Portland area. And so that's kind of my history. We've just been trying to continue to manage her treatment and make sure she's taking it. And with that, we'll be able to continue to live the lifestyle that she's living now. Did we have other content, or we're going to field questions?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I had to get back on screen. So we do have just a couple of beginning questions. Anybody on the YouTube side, feel free to throw questions into the comments. But what would you say, being parents, of various different types of leukodystrophies, what has been the most challenging part about being a caregiver?
I think being a caregiver, one of the hardest things is your own time.
Yeah.
In my case with Andy, I mean, he was a 24/7 needed care. He couldn't do anything for himself. And as he got older, feeding became more and more difficult. And we'd spend an hour at each meal trying to feed him and get food down him. And when he was finally 7 years old, we had a G-tube put in, and that basically helped take a lot of the time, or gave us more time, so we could also enjoy our meal and not make it so late. But you're constantly, as a caregiver, you're constantly watching your child, making sure that nothing's bothering them. They can't speak. You're always watching for symptoms of issues if they start to get irritable. And you really don't have any time to yourself.
Yeah, very much so. Iran, do you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I do. I certainly, that would have been my answer as well. Time management, and Aiden certainly was nowhere as badly affected at this point in time as Andy was. But between, Aiden, we have to feed Aiden manually. We have to take him to the toilet. We do physio with him daily. And sometimes you sort of look up at the clock and go, my gosh, it's 11:30. I've been going for 3 hours and done nothing but quote Aiden stuff, and that's fine. But there are days that you get frustrated because you have your life, you have 2 other kids, a wife, all of which you should be spending time with or trying to. And so that's certainly been one of the major challenges, and not to feel guilty. One of my big problems is feeling guilty if I don't get it all done. If I don't do this or that or what have you. Obviously, there are certain essentials like feeding and toileting that there are no choices on, but there's other things that, if you miss a day of physio, it probably isn't the end of the world. I need to cut myself some slack and let him enjoy that. Another challenge would be to treat Aiden like an adult, not like a sick kid. I don't want him to grow up spoiled or pampered. I mean, I want to love him and treat him great, but I also want him to have some discipline. I want him to have responsibility. And frequently in giving him responsibility, I sometimes find I make the task twice as long and probably take more of my time. But I think that's been important for him. As I said, I want him to become a nice adult to say please and thank you, and not to feel like he's entitled just because he's been given, for sure, a raw deal in life. So that's been a challenge as well, because my heart breaks for him at times. He hasn't grown up. He hasn't grown up feeling sorry for himself, but there are times I feel sorry for him, and it's important to me that doesn't convey too often, because I don't want him to go around self-pitying. I don't think that's a quality life for him, and I don't think that'll make him into a nice adult. John?
Yeah, actually, your talking gave me a couple thoughts. And again, with Ashley being in a little bit different position where she was never really physically compromised, I guess going back to siblings, one of the things that I learned years after the diagnosis and initial hurdles that we had to get through, one of those, which I'll touch on, is with CTX comes cataracts. And so Ashley had to go through bilateral cataract surgery at 10 years old. And I think the one thing that it taught me was how resilient kids can be with some of the difficult things that they're going through. I mean, I remember having to put what was effectively the consistency of a Neosporin directly on her eyeball, hold her and keep her eye, hold her eye open so that I could do that, and then close her eye for her and make sure that that was applied properly. And it was uncomfortable. Clearly it would be uncomfortable. I can't imagine having to do that myself several times a day, after an eye that just had surgery on it. But she was just a real champion being able to get through a lot of those initial difficult things. And secondary to that, touching on the siblings, her brother, that, you know, we like Ron said, it's giving that attention and that time to everyone else in the family. And I didn't really learn until later that he felt, you know, sort of like second class, even though I didn't feel like we were treating him that way or ignoring him. He definitely voiced that as a concern later. So those are some of the things that, you know, that you kind of reflect on and hope that you can maybe convey in a situation like what we're doing now here, of things to think about. And then one of the other things with Ashley was the difficulty in school and learning how to navigate the education system with an IEP, because CTX wasn't something that was very well known and not at all within the school, you know, district, and the psychological things, the learning disabilities, things like that, because she was never really officially diagnosed with an ADD or ADHD, and so she would exhibit these things, and they had no way to, you know, put a name to it, and so that was tough to finally convince the school to give her the assistance and accommodations that she needed.
You know, that's another thing too. As a caregiver, you're spending all of your time with your affected child, and you do have to remember, if you have a sibling, that they require your attention also. So between taking care of the affected one and your other child, you're real tired, and you definitely have to look out after yourself. And also, it's a joint thing. Your spouse needs to be involved in helping with the day-to-day chores with the child. You know, it may be one's working with the child one day and the other's out with the sibling. But you have to look at the sibling as well and make sure that they're not left behind.
Absolutely. Great points to all of you. And I do have a couple of follow-up questions. I'd like to start with a question for Ron. When you were saying that Aiden has his own responsibilities, you know, around the house, because knowing Aiden, and he's fairly physically affected, so certainly, you know, some chores that you might give to a child that might seem very simple for that child to do, you know, what kind of responsibilities are you giving Aiden specifically that you might need to be modified, but still are very important, as you said, to make sure that he's growing up a good human being?
Absolutely. So Aiden will put away dishes now. That'll be plastic dishes, not glass or anything beyond that, for obvious reasons. Aiden's in a wheelchair. He's got a significant muscle strength problems and a tremor. So he's got a real tough time holding on to things, but he can put away plastic cups and glasses. They fall, not a big deal. He can reach down and pick them up. For cooking, this comes really in handy because I seem to have a 30-second memory. He'll read out recipes, so I will continually, he'll have the recipe in front of him, and I'll say, okay, how many teaspoons of this or that? So he'll help me with that type of activity. He'll do a little bit of cleaning with dusting sort of things. For sure it's modified. He's not going to be pushing around a vacuum cleaner. He just said he's total body affected, both, you know, upper body and lower body. Trying to think of what else he helps us with. Picking up stuff. Sometimes we'll just create, actually. Sometimes we'll create things. We'll spread out like Lego and have him put it away. Just to give him something, to work on, and also to help with his fine motor skills. I would say that's the majority of it. Occasionally helping to set the table a little bit with the cutlery. It's definitely modified. As I said, sometimes in doing it, it requires more work for me than just doing it myself. But I think it's important that you do these sorts of things and do them on a regular basis.
Right. And this is more of a question for all of you, but since John, you kind of initiated the question itself, I'd like to begin with you. But in terms of finding a balance between, of course, your leukodystrophy child is going to be a little bit more hands-on and almost require more care, but a more specialized type of care and a more specialized type of parenting. But can any of you give any advice on how to find a balance between making sure that your leukodystrophy child is getting the care that they need, but as well balancing it with their siblings and combating that, you know, having your sibling feel like a second class or having them feel like the other sibling is getting more attention? Are there certain ways that you can find strike a balance so that the family unit is feeling cohesive?
I don't have anything specific, really. I guess I would just say make sure that any activities you're planning are including everybody, you know. And again, I'm in a little bit different of a situation because Ashley wasn't physically compromised. So really they were able to participate, you know, outside of, let's say she's recovering from an eye surgery, for example, because that's really one of my biggest memories of the things she had to go through. I would say that's probably primary, and just, you know, you just have to conscientiously make that effort to check in with them.
I think communication is huge, to talk to them constantly, and to not be afraid to ask tough questions, not be afraid to get tough answers, and to acknowledge that it's okay if they have, yeah, I mean, like I certainly, my son and my daughter probably to a lesser extent have had, you know, anxiety over this at times, and I think that's completely normal, and that's okay to talk about it, and to ask them how they're feeling about, you know, where Aiden's at, when Aiden's had setbacks, and he's had a few. We also have them involved now that they've gotten older, not so much when they're younger, but involved with Aiden's care. So they help out with stretching, especially now that COVID-19's occurred and they're home more. We have a nightly ritual where we're all sort of around his bed and putting on some oils, which he seems to love. It helps him sleep at night. We've done a lot of things as a family. We play a lot of board games. We try and be very inclusive. So we do activities that involve them all, hopefully, but aren't boring. You know, they're you know, quote, normal at one point 15, 16-year-olds, so they want to do things that are fun. So movies together. But I think the big thing is communication. We talk to them constantly, and it's okay to ask them questions that you sometimes, you know, you don't necessarily really want to, you know, or you might be afraid of the answers, maybe the best way of putting it. But at least then you get it out there. You know, at least at one point in time, we took our kids to a place called, I think it was called Touchstone. Well, I might be mistaking that with some movie designation for a secret agency, but that basically talked to them about, you know, how they were feeling mentally. It did, you know, turned out they didn't think they needed it, but I'm all for using those sorts of resources if you think your kids require that. I'm not an expert in mental health, and it can be really tough on siblings to see, yeah, to see their brother or sister going through this. I mean, it's not something to be lightly taken. So, yeah, I would say talk to them all the time, but also now, like, don't live your life in sadness. There's so much. I think we've all had great times with our kids. We're a happy family. Aiden's probably the happiest of my 3 kids. We enjoy the good days we have, and we weather the bad ones that we have. But we don't live in a morose life. We don't sit around feeling sorry for ourselves. I don't have huge complaints. I have my bad days, but in general, I'm an upbeat, happy person.
We treated Andy like a regular member of the family. Not that he was disabled. We would take Andy everywhere with us. We would go to events that our older son had. Our older son was 30 months older than him, and he grew up with his brother being totally incapable of doing anything. But we would take his brother to the hospital with us in the middle of the night. He'd just curl up on the chairs and go to sleep. You know, it was just a fact of life. But we take Andy and we take Joel everywhere together. We treated them as if they were equals. And while, you know, we didn't have the advantage that Andy could speak to us or move around himself, so we still did everything as a family. And we didn't let it bother us. Back in those days, Costco was fairly new, and we had a wheelchair that had for Andy, you know, Costco aisles were nice and big, and Joe would take Andy in the wheelchair and go running down the aisle and jump on the back of it and hit the brake at the end of the aisle. It was great because back then the store wasn't busy. And, you know, we let him do it. We let him do things that we probably, if they were normal, we wouldn't have let him do. But that was keeping Joel happy and keeping Andy happy as well. You could hear him throughout the store laughing.
I would say it probably helped for us too that Aiden got disciplined just like the other two, probably more so. He's got a stubborn streak, which has served him well in many things in life, but it can be a real challenge as a parent. So Aiden was sent to his room, or, you know, when he was younger, into a corner. probably as often, if not more often, than my other two kids. When he was rude, he talked back. Didn't share well with his siblings or what have you. So, and I think it probably helped to see that he was going to be treated as much as possible like the other two. As he had the lion's share of our time, yeah, no doubt. But I did try and carve out time for the two. I coached Liam in some sports. We sure went to Alex's dancing when I could. And as I said, I try and engage all of them all the time in communication. Even if we're not talking about big issues, just how was your day, what's up, etc. I don't think it's bad for any parent, regardless of whether you have a sick child or not. I think communication is the key to many things in life.
We had just the opposite. We had no discipline in the house.
No,
because every time we try to discipline Joel, we raised our voice just a little bit, or externally to Joel, Andy would start laughing. So no discipline in the house.
Yes. All right, Alan, there's a question from our YouTube side that actually would probably best be answered by you, because they said they're waiting confirmation, waiting results, but they have a differential of a lesser-known LD called L2-hydroglutaric aciduria, and I apologize if I butchered that, or Canavan. They received this on MRI review last week, but their question is, they are newly diagnosed with an 8-month-old baby. How can we prepare for the uncertainty of not knowing how severe the progression or the deterioration will be? They're expecting this to be more in the severity of Canavan.
Well, Canavans is a very, it's a hard disease. And what they've been finding is there's really two strains. Well, there's more than two strains, but there's one strain where the child is very cranky, constantly crying, and there's the other strain, which is what my son had, where he was very laid back. He was just a happy baby, and that's why we had a hard time initially knowing something was wrong. And if it wasn't for the fact that we had an older son, to see the progression of him gaining skills and being able to roll over, Andy wasn't able to do any of those things. And that was really our tip-off that there was something wrong with him. A Canavan's child is one that you kind of throw the rule book out, the playbook out, because these kids have issues that the playbook doesn't tell you about. Such things as the body temperature, body thermometer. It can be way out of whack and they'll spike a fever. You have to make sure that the child has a lot of fluid. And that's what we had to do with Andy. He would get ear infections. And before we knew it, he would become dehydrated, and we'd have to take him in to get more fluids. You have to really watch the child and see, if he's real cranky, you're going to end up having to use drugs to quiet him down. They become very spastic, and the primary drug they use for that is baclofen. We also gave our son Klonopin, just a little quarter of a pill at night, just so he'd sleep at night. But my big concern, or my big recommendation, is and it sounds like whichever way it goes, whether it's Canavans or the other disease, then my big recommendation is don't necessarily wait to, like we did, to have things such as a feeding tube put in, because you'll find that he'll be a lot happier and you'll spend a lot less time trying to feed him. Keep up physical therapy for muscle tone. You may not need to do that till he's probably a year old, year and a half, but you want to start working on it now. There are a lot of lot of trials going on right now for finding a cure. They're not there yet, but they're getting closer. And it may be possible that he may be able to join in some of those research studies that are going on. If I haven't answered your question and you have more information, Keely can certainly give me your information and we can talk. We can talk off air.
Yeah,
absolutely. If any of our people that are on our YouTube that are watching right now, if you want to connect with our panelists, feel free to email us at office@ulf.org, and we'd be happy to connect you with the panelists. So that way you're not sharing your email address in the YouTube comments. But I did want to take that question and even take it just a step back, because Alan, you did a great job answering. But Ron, if you want to kind of take over on maybe how do you as a caregiver deal with the uncertainty of not knowing what's happening and what to expect for the future?
Yeah, that was certainly the path we took. When Aiden had his MRI finally about a year and a half, they didn't know what type of leukodystrophy he had. And the initial sort of, we think it's one of these four things, were 3 different leukodystrophies, all of which were very severe, along with a mitochondrial disorder, if I remember correctly. And in fact, his actual type of leukodystrophy was not discovered for another 8 or 9 months. So we did have that anxiety. And as I said, I think the first thing we did was started reading. And I think there is such a thing as reading too much, but you have to sort of know what you can handle and be okay with what you can handle. Not so much from an intellectual standpoint, perhaps, but more from a mental, some people need something. We're all different. Some people need to know things, and that's great. And other people, they'd rather not know, and that's fine too. Know who you are and what you can deal with, and be okay if your partner or spouse is different, because there's a good chance they will be. Find balance. And the first week was hell. We were in tears, we were in shock, numb. We were getting phone calls from family, etc., which made you sort of relive it. That was tough, but then we really tried to find things that we tried to find balance. So at that point we had an older sister. She was only a year and change. We still tried to find things we enjoyed. So we watched shows together. I exercised. I tried to eat well. I think there's a lot to be said for a wholesome life, or a whole life where the things you put into you make a big difference into how you feel. I find exercise is a massive stress reliever for me, and I do feel lots of stress lots of times in my life. I'm a high stress individual, so I picked up my exercise level somewhat, which often was late at night because there didn't seem to be time anywhere else. We thought about it. Hopefully we didn't stick our hands in the sand, but we didn't dwell on it either. We went back to work fairly shortly after that. We talked to each other. I think I've always found a ton of strength from my wife, Marla. She seems to pick me up when I'm down, and hopefully I'm able to do the same for her. So once again, communication was huge. I wish I had taken up offers of help from friends, and I didn't because I was too proud or stupid, pick your adjective. But people were sincerely offering to help, look after Alex. We'd get out for dinner for a night, or help us with some of the chores we weren't getting around to. And I was like, no, we'll get to it. In retrospect, I wish I'd done it. As I said in the previous previous broadcast, it's something I've offered to other people when they've gone through challenges, whether it be cancer in the family, whatever. I've been sincere. People don't generally ask if they don't want to be taken up on that offer. So I wish I'd taken help, but no. Getting back things, it is hugely anxious, and I think you have to understand who you are as a person. Inform yourself as much as you need to, but don't live and breathe it every second. I would say the same, in healthcare. I would say the same if you're diagnosed with cancer or asthma or diabetes. Educate yourself, know what you can do, but don't make it your entire life. There's more to it than that. John, would you say anything else, or?
Yeah, I would echo the don't dwell on it. I mean, of course, and I'm gonna maybe overshare a little bit or here, maybe not. It put a strain on my marriage. There's no doubt about it. So I think the communication part is key, and but it's also difficult when the expectations that each person has are different. I was and have always been a problem solver. They figure out what the issue is and find the solution. So I think and my now ex-wife, Hers was more of curl into a ball and sky is falling, you know, versus kind of scenario. And that's tough to manage that, to be honest. So I think you really have to strike a balance between that and trying to focus on the current, you know, enjoy what you have now. When in the situation you're in currently, don't focus so much on that unknown future. Kind of, and you know, that's been my life though. It's always cross those bridges when you get to them, really, because to try and predict or stew on what may be to come only serves to bring you down in the current situation. Be happy with where you are in the current situation. So that's what I would kind of offer from that perspective.
You know, we were unable to look at the internet when Andy was born, and all we could find was in the medical books he would live 2 to 3 years, and that's what we had to grab onto. But we treated it as if, well, he's going to be with us for a long time. And as it is, he lived to 15 years old. He was a part of the family, and my wife and I were in tune with each other, with what his needs were. We had disagreements from time to time, but for the most part, you know, we did well at taking care of him. And big line of communication. And while we knew someday he was going to leave us, we didn't let that stop us, let it drag us down. We just let life go on as it is and as it was.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to say is don't be, you know, in touching on what Ron was saying about getting help. I didn't really reach out. I'm the same kind of person, Ron, proud and one, again, like I said, problem solver. Do take those offers if they come to you. I didn't really get any because, again, my situation was different. But also don't be, I guess, offended, if you will, if people in your life or your friend circle don't know how to react or respond to it, because it's a difficult, you know,
yes,
looking out from the outside in, it's really tough to know what to say. So I guess if anything, don't you know, take that too seriously, or like I said, be offended or react alarmed as to how other people might process what you're going through.
Well, that's a great point, John. You're right. Because
Yeah.
people feel awkward. They don't, and some won't even call you because they don't know what to say. And you know, we've all probably been in that position ourselves when you got a family member or a friend who's gone through a tough thing. You go, oh my God, how do you put into words how sad or terrible you feel? And so some people just don't reach out and don't be too judgmental on your friends or family. People, when they're stressed, say the worst things. Like if they were to actually write down what they said, they'd be horrified sometimes. So I always try and think of intent, not necessarily the words that come out, because most people mean well. In fact, I don't know, you know, amongst my friend group and family, maybe I'm lucky, they all mean extremely well. It's just sometimes it's hard to put into words, especially in a stressful situation. And I don't think it's a bad thing for you to reach out to them and tell them, etc. I think the more people who know, the more it can give you comfort and
yeah, no, and I'm glad that you brought that up, John, and I'm going to skip ahead a couple of questions. Don't worry, the people, I see them in the YouTube and I will get back to them. I want to skip ahead to this question just because it fits so perfectly with what we were just talking about. We are newly diagnosed for our 16-month-old. How best do you share with your friends and family? We find ourselves not wanting to burden them, but then we sound like we are downplaying things.
Oh, I think we tended to downplay things. I think once again that was it. I can totally sympathize with that. And I don't think there's any one rule that'll work for all your friends and your family, because once again, their ability to handle things is going to vary greatly amongst them. There's no golden rule. I think I probably treated my friends and family like I treat my kids, as we discussed Aiden's condition, where I let them sort of dictate the pace at which I talk to them about. You know, I initially explained, especially to my immediate family, the diagnosis, and then I listened to what they said and how they reacted as to how to go from there. And as I said, some want all the information and give it to me straight, doctor, so to speak, and others, they go okay, and there's long silence, and then you talk about the last football game or something, and that's fine too. I think very much For my need, I'm not one that needs to unburden myself a whole lot. I think I sort of let them dictate the pace and the amount of information, and whether I downplayed it or was the cold hard facts based on their personality types.
I think a lot of your friends, of course, they're not going to know what to say. They're not going to know how to react to you telling them. And they're obviously, when they do come ask you about it, they're going to have a lot of questions that you may or may not know the answers. And you may not want to discuss it with your friends until you have more answers and you know exactly what you're dealing with. It is difficult, and it's just something that you need to do in your own time when you're ready to do it, when you're ready to tell friends. When they see the child, they're going to know, obviously, that there's an issue. And at that time, you may say something just very general, but if you don't know what the prognosis is, just simply say he has a rare disorder that they're investigating, they're researching, and you can leave it at that until you have more information. I know that's what we went through because we didn't have a diagnosis for a good 3 years, and so we didn't know what to tell people. And I will admit, we had a lot of friends before Andy was born, and a lot of them tended to shy away. Yes. Because they don't know how to talk to you and ask you questions, and you don't know exactly what to tell them. So that's a difficult thing. It's just a matter of how you feel about how you want to approach it and what you want to say.
Great. All right. Perfect answers. Everything. Excuse me. Thank you so much. We're going to backtrack a little bit. Did you do any home modifications that helped reduce the strain physically? Was there anything that was a big help or a modified vehicle? So anything that you guys changed in your quote unquote normal lives that you felt was like the biggest help for you in terms of caring for your loved one physically?
Well, I think we got extra equipment as Andy got older. Something to lift him up, to put him in the bathtub, or to put him in his tumble form chair. We also, for most of his life, we were able to just put him in the car without a car seat, or with a special car seat. And we eventually ended up having to get a van that we could carry him in. My house, unfortunately, is 3 stories. Well, it's a split level, so there's really two sets of stairs. And he lived upstairs, or his bedroom was upstairs, and his days downstairs. So we did end up having to build a room downstairs for him, and we built a ramp so that we could back the van up to the side of the house where the door was, and unload him right there, bring him right into the basement, where he ended up spending his time night and day. He was 103 pounds when he finally passed, and I had been carrying him up and down those flights of stairs.
Yeah, stair chair. We have a stair chair as well. I would say that's been massively huge. We do have lifts. I tend to physically do with Aiden still because I'm still big enough and young enough to get away with that, but that'll come in handy at some point in time. It just takes a little more time, but the stair chair was massive. Carrying Aiden up and down the stairs, A, wasn't safe, and B, was going to wear my knees and back out. We've had now 2 wheelchair mobility vans. The newest one we've had, which is now 3 or 4 years old, is a Toyota Sienna, which I think we got from Braun Mobility, which is available, I believe, in North America. It's been fantastic. Before that, we had a Sprinter, and that was a challenge. Just almost too big. But the Sienna's been a great vehicle. Aiden sits up shotgun next to the driver, although we can put the passenger seat back in. That's been huge. Ramps, unfortunately, we were a bit of a split level house, so we put ramps in and they've worked out well. But the two big ones for us has definitely been the Stair chair. We use an Acorn Stair chair, although there are other brands out there, and the mobility vans. Rather than lifting Aiden from a wheelchair into a car seat and banging his head off the side of the roof and all those things, that got old really quickly.
All right, perfect. Thank you. One more from YouTube. Are there any tips for starting to get respite care or home nursing? How do you approach insurance first, or try to find a home nursing company first? We have 2 children with 4-H, and one is now completely disabled.
I would definitely go to insurance first, and I would also get your social worker involved, because there are groups out there, there are agencies out there that will help provide funding for it. I know some of the funding that used to be available, some of the programs that were out there, like my son had, are no longer available. But a social worker would be very beneficial when it comes to also looking for programs. Places like the Elks Club, if your insurance doesn't pay anything. All of a sudden, I can't think of a couple of the other organizations, but there are organizations out there that will help provide funding for that. But I would definitely start with insurance first, because obviously you don't want to have to pay all of it out of pocket, and there may be some state funding for it or federal funding for it. We found a program for our son called the Katie Beckett waiver, and that provided all the care that he needed for getting medical care, getting equipment, and that was something that even our social worker didn't know about. And we ended up finding out about that through the ULF. So there are organizations out there, and there is federal funding out there. You just have to be able to research it, find what might be available for you.
John, anything to add to that, or?
Not really. Well, I mean, we did have to go through some insurance or some difficulty in getting medication coverage, particularly because Ashley's medication was treated as experimental, because it's off-label and not designated for the treatment of her actual disease. So I guess one of the things I would recommend is reaching out to support groups, maybe like the OLF. That's really what helped us at the time, is they had a network of folks that they could reach out to within the FDA to help us draft documentation and supporting testimony to really bolster how critical this medication was, and along with pharmaceutical companies. And, and again, my situation is probably different than some others, but really tap into the support networks that you have available to you. And I guess to finalize that, never take no for an answer. Regardless of who you're dealing with, if it's the medical community or the insurance industry, always push and be persistent, because that's really what's going to win the day for you.
Amen.
And Keeling, maybe you can help me out in this, Keeling, but I think that's something that maybe we're looking at having what we call a ULF ambassador program, where each state will have a contact person associated with the ULF who might be able to help people navigate the specific, I think it differs. I'm from Canada, so once again, I have a difficult time speaking to your insurances and your government policies, but I imagine each state has different rules with funding or different organizations within the state. And I would think that would be something that our ambassadors could help you sort of navigate your way through, to find out where the different sources of help or different agencies, feedback from people who've used them. I would think that'd be a valuable role for them. Is that something? I think we're hoping to get that done within the next year. Is that correct, Kaylee?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we're hoping to get it launched, the state ambassador program, within the next 12 months. And it is exactly what Ron was saying. It's just, it'll be someone more on the local level, because as most of you listening know, the ULF is based out of Illinois. And so our knowledge base is, very limited in terms of if people are coming to us with a question and they live in Florida and they want to know how the insurance companies are working in Florida. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of resources in Florida to be able to help you answer that question. So our solution to that is to create the ambassador program that'll have advocates on a state level that might be able to provide a little bit more localized assistance, and even try to create more support group so that conversations can be happening outside of the ULF conference, because obviously it's once a year, but we want to, we need support all year round. So that program, which, like we said, we hope to launch within the next year, will be a way to combat some of those things.
Yeah.
But let's see.
Right?
Ron, your daughter's helping out in the comments. Thank you, Alex. Alex, for those of you looking into home care, there are a lot of summer camps for children with disabilities, which is a great for fostering independence for the child and as a break for the caregivers. Thank you so much, Alex.
That is so true.
And something to keep in mind, I'll plug some of the educational resources that are going to be available on the website fairly soon as well. We do have a special education professional that is willing to speak to any parents who need some assistance navigating their child within a school system. So if you reach out to the ULF, we can get you in touch with her. But Sue Stewart, the special education programs are available in the U.S. for children from birth to 21. That is very accurate. And then depending on the severity of how progressed and how severe the leukodystrophy has affected your child, there's even transition programs that could even assist in helping them through high school and then even trying to find gainful employment. So there's a lot of really awesome resources that we can put you in touch with if there are any concerns that you have as being an advocate for your child with a leukodystrophy as a student. But one of the last questions that I want to ask you guys, because we are getting down to about 10 minutes left in the session. So if there are any additional questions from our YouTube friends, feel free to add them in the comments. But in the meantime, I would like to ask, and John, I'll start with you just because I would say you are probably the most gung-ho, if you will, in terms of being an advocate for your daughter's disease. Because obviously you're on the ULF board, you're very involved with the ULF, but you also have your own initiatives that function outside of the ULF and independent of ULF. So could you describe and tell us a little bit about your process of finding the diagnosis, and then at what point did you decide, you know what, I need to be even more active and I need to be an advocate for not only my child, but for everyone else that is affected?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you just have to dig deep and find that passion inside of you to advocate not only for your child but for everyone else. You're going to. I wanted to add this as a comment, so thanks for calling me out. As I want to, when you walk into a room, you will be the most knowledgeable person about whatever your child is dealing with, hands down, because leukodystrophies are rare. Back when Ashley was diagnosed, this was back in 2004. I don't think Google was even ubiquitous as a search engine back then. I think I was using Yahoo, and I had to go and dig. Like, I went, I think 8 or 10 pages deep in a Yahoo search. Who does that anymore? Nobody goes past page 2 on any kind of Google search. And with the way things were back then, it was hard to find information. It's hard to find people that were experiencing this either as a caregiver or as an affected individual. So I would say just be persistent and start to think a little bit outside the box with the whatever you're dealing with. And some of these things that I'm currently involved in now, Keely, were not even necessarily on the radar back then. It was mainly about focusing on Ashley's care. And then once that was kind of managed, then I started to think about, what is the future going to be like for her when I'm not here anymore? So it's really a big, it started from that thought process of what can I do to ensure a good future for her, And then by association and by expanding that effort, it you realize that, oh, this is going to affect many more people than just her. And as we're now to the point where we're getting diagnosis much earlier. The average age of diagnosis for CTX is early 30s. And so, we've been fortunate to see infants and toddlers, some of those diagnosed because they were siblings of other older children, but we're beginning to see that age of diagnosis drop down. I would say, reach out to your support networks, go online and search for articles related to whatever leukodystrophy your child has, and find people who've contributed to research, reach out to them, understand what they've done and what they're doing, and maybe what other things they might be knowledgeable in as far as research efforts or other initiatives happening. And that, I'll touch on the newborn screening thing real quick. That's one thing that, because of the way CTX works, we understand how critical the treatment is to get as early as possible. And so that's one of the initiatives that I've been involved in helping to kind of move along. It's been, I don't know, a 10-year effort, but we're finally at the point where we're in a pilot study and we're looking to maybe get a newborn screening nominated to the RESP next year. So just never give up, find out, work as hard as you can to reach out and get information, because it's out there and nobody's going to come to you. I'm going to tell you that with such a rare condition, you really have to be the champion for your child.
Wonderful. Ron or Alan, do you have anything else you would like to add about being an advocate for not only your child, but for the children of many?
You have to be your own advocate. I mean, that says it all, because if you don't speak out, no one's going to speak out for you. And you obviously want the best for your child. You want to get the best care. And, you're going to have doctors that are going to look at you and say you're crazy. I mean, if it's not a regular doctor that you're seeing, or you're going to the emergency room, you have to speak up. These kids require special care. They're not your average toddler or adult or teenager that goes running around out playing in the dirt and climbing trees. And you've got to fight tooth and nail every inch of the way for them.
I would say we've been really lucky with our school system and our healthcare, and you do have to advocate. But I would say you don't want to turn everything into a battle. That's tremendously draining on you, on your children, maybe witnessing your spouse, and it doesn't always get the results. I like John, I'm a problem solver. I tend to be goal oriented, and I frequently feel that if you advocate and it's an aggressive fighting type of thing, I'm not often getting the results I'm getting people getting their backs up, and all of a sudden it becomes this conflict. I try to advocate in a more subtle way. I try and help arrive at solutions with them towards the desired goal. So, yes, I mean, I think you have to be there to support your kids, and there's a bottom line that you need to attain. But I think you don't want to live your life full of conflict. That's a horror. It's all of us have enough stress in our lives anyway, so adding to that. So there's a way, I think, to advocate for your child and to push without turning everything into World War III with one doctor after another. There's
no call, no sense in that.
No, you can do it without being the proverbial a-hole, or just use my language or whatever. There's a way to advocate that's constructive and meaningful, and sometimes stepping back and saying, what are we, here's what we're trying to achieve, and letting them, because most of the people you're dealing with do have your best interests at heart, and sometimes you're tied up in bureaucracy or held back, but they're, if you get them on your side, there's usually a way to get around that. I would say, yeah, try to the people who have the fingers on the purse strings, try to get them on onto your side. And it's not hard to. I mean, in many ways, they look at what you're dealing with, and most people have sympathy for the plight that we all share.
Yeah, and one follow-up thought is, again, can't stress this enough, really rely or lean on your support networks. I mean, I don't know if that was blind luck or fate or whatever, but we really fell into a advantageous situation with the ULF. Again, they were at the time the premier leukodystrophy support organization, but the network and the relationships that they've formed in their existence has really been instrumental in the progress that we've made. I mean, I think Ron and Alan, you can both attest to this, to be able to go to a conference and meet folks researching or physicians involved in your particular area of the leukodystrophies, to be able to sit in the same room with them and ask them questions is something that you really can't put a price on. So I mean, I know times are different right now, but hopefully we're going to get back to where that's the norm. But do take advantage when you can of being able to do that.
Yeah, there's no clock ticking. You don't have a 15-minute or 20-minute appointment at the conference. You can sit there and have a coffee or a beer or a glass of wine and talk for 45 minutes. You develop a really strong relationship. And it's gotten to the point that, and bless them, we've had doctors like Dr. Vandernapp or Dr. Bernard or Dr. Van Keitsvoort in Ottawa, who have, we now have from this conference such a relationship with them that I can reach out and send them an email at 2 in the morning, and they'll get back to me with a solid answer that's been just incredible. Because I mean, a lot of our local doctors, they're neurologists, they're pediatricians. Leukodystrophies just aren't ever going to be their expertise, and they can't be. You're right. You're always the most knowledgeable person in the room. So the conferences, I'm so grateful to our doctors and our researchers and our physiotherapists who I've reached out to as well, and our dietitians who I've reached out to as well, from Kennedy Krieger and John Hopkins. I mean, they're just so generous, and it's great to get to know them, and they know you. And if I only see them once a year, it's been a godsend.
The doctors that come to the conferences are just, you can't ask for a better group of people.
So generous.
Because they will sit with you, whether it's for 10 minutes or 2 hours, and they'll sit there and talk to you, and they'll give you all their information if you want to contact them, and they're very free with their time with you, and that's what makes the ULF very unique.
Yeah, and the other parents, yeah,
along with networking with parents at the conference. It's a very helpful thing.
So to wrap up, thank you so much, Alan, Ron, and John, for all of your insights. Thank you for everyone that has participated in asking questions. I do want to just give a couple of plugs for some ULF programs that we have in this last couple of minutes that we do have. We do have some COVID-19 relief funds available. So if you are finding that your family has faced job loss because of COVID-19 and you're facing medical bills and we might be able to help you, you can go to ulf.org/COVID-19 grants and you can apply. We had a very generous sponsor give us $30,000, and we have broken those into $500 grants to try to provide some relief to leukodystrophy families that also are facing job loss during this time. So more information can be found, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions about that. But I also wanted to give a quick plug for some of the initiatives that will start this fall. We are hoping to have monthly educational and support group webinars starting possibly in August, where we will alternate in between an educational webinar 1 month followed by a support group, well, not necessarily a webinar, it'll be more of a Zoom call that is more private, and you'll hopefully be able to, we'll see you, we can hear you, we can have more of a conversation. So please keep an eye on the Facebook page and the ULF website for more information on those initiatives as we get started. We have found that the virtual format, unfortunately, we don't like it because we don't get to see you in person, but at the same time, we're glad that we're able to bring even more people, make them familiar with the ULF and our initiatives, and we're so grateful to have everyone participating. So if you have any questions about the ULF, please give us an email, office@ulf.org, and we'd be happy to chat with you. So thank you so much again to Alan, Ron, and John. Thank you for everyone for participating in the chat, and we hope to see you next year in Chicago.
Thank you, Keely.
Everybody.
Thanks, Keely.